Alright guys, so new Planar from SIVGA today and
Oh no.
oh no. Oh no. JK, the Nightingale is actually really good depending. The overall sound is very unique in the best way. Now even though the sub bass might look really rolled off as well as the vocal gain looks like there's just, no vocal gain. And normally I would have been like, nope, nah. But it somehow works. Now you're obviously not going to get that deep and texture rumble in the sub bass nor super detailed and breathy vocals, but they're not gone, just pushed back to the background like the SA6 lineup, and instead this allows the treble and soundstage to be the main focus. If you're a bass head, go look for another set, and if you prefer the more traditional Harman and diffuse field sound, then you're most likely not going to enjoy these. But for the rest of the adventurous folks, these are pretty good. Let's first talk about the resolution and micro nuances on the Nightingale. When I was comparing it, I constantly had to switch to a more expensive IEM to compare because they just keep getting beat out by the Nightingale. And the Nightingale still topped it in terms of treble detail, sharper imaging, more air and reverb to the cymbal crashes, and you hear every little nuances in the strings and air from flutes and saxophones. And it's under $300. It's very unique and it reminds me of the original EJ07. Not nearly the same, but you do need to listen to these at a louder volume. I don't think you'll get the most out of the experience otherwise. Because the Nightingale has the widest and most open stage I've heard before the Z1R, U12T, and Prestige LTD. And it makes sense because if you look at the graph, it's pretty much a straight line with a crap ton of air slapped on at the end, which means every element in the track is positioned at a similar distance, laid out evenly in front of you, kind of like the U12T flat in that sense, without one popping out more than the other and cramping up the perception of headspace. The sub bass and vocals in particular are more in the background and less in your face, giving that illusion of distance and creating that sense of stage, adding to the perception of a more open space. Likewise, instruments are cleanly layered and very easy to pick out because of the stage size, plus the fast attack and decay technicalities are again very good, as well as the sharper imaging from the boosted treble also helps with picking things out. Technical performance wise, the Nightingale pretty much eats up every IEM up until the $500, $600 price point, and sometimes even those depending on the song. Mid bass is also very well layered, guitar strings are detailed, and lower mids are actually very punchy, textured, and nuanced. It could use more weight in my opinion and just more slam and air behind the driver, but again that's more of a driver characteristic, and it may feel like the vocals are warm or slightly colored because the mid bass is boosted, but I think that's actually just more because SIVGA flatlined the upper mids and the vocal gain, which created a less open vocal presentation, not as extended and natural like the EA1000s, the Studio 4s, and RS5 for example. The timbre overall actually felt very normal. The Nightingale didn't sound like a Planar. It didn't have that floaty, fuzzy, light timbre from Planars. It felt grounded and relatively natural. However, the resolution and texture in the vocals and sub bass is not as competitive. Passable, but not nearly on the same level as the treble and everything else because they're just more in the background and lights highlighted and focused on. So then this puts the Nightingale in a weird position. On one hand, you're getting top of the line performance in certain categories you only dream of in higher end IEMs, but on the other hand, the vocals and sub bass are just meh. Like I've heard better for around $100. So the question then becomes, who is this set for? Well, number one, if you have a lot of sub bass in your music, then it's not for you. Modern hip hop, rap, EDM, hyperpop are not recommended on these. They just don't sound as engaging and sometimes overly sharp because of the treble. Nightingale actually sounds fine with pop, K-pop, and J-pop, but I feel like it shouldn't be your first choice because the vocals are not as enjoyable, highlighted forward, as well as the sub bass roll off doesn't help either. So something like the Hype 2 or the Top would probably be better still. Second, if you like listening loud to rock, metal, energetic stuff, then these are also not for you. The treble just gets too much with those genres at higher volumes. Mid volume, it's actually pretty fire, but you can't really blast these up. And then lastly, if you're a vocal lover, also probably pass on these unless you fit a very specific profile, aka you have a lot of slower songs. So artists like Lana Del Rey, Hebe, Adele, Lorde, V singers with very deep vocals all actually sound very great. The slower and moodier nature of the song allows you to turn up the volume, bringing the vocals more forward, revealing more details without having to worry about getting your ears destroyed versus a more exciting track. So genres like indie, acoustics, piano ballads, slow R&B are all great on these and becomes very immersive, especially with the staging and layering as well as the extra slight energy from the treble imaging. Likewise, instrumentals, orchestrals, classicals all sound fantastic on these because you don't notice much of the pushback vocals and the sub bass roll off because there just aren't any. The reverb from piano keys, shakers, and saxophones on jazz and soul tracks are especially addicting. Super detailed and airy, very pinpoint sharp and OCD like imaging reminds me of the Mess, and I would highly recommend the Nightingale as a treble head set or like a detailed set, because in terms of audiophile language, the Nightingale is the definition of sparkle and air. But like I mentioned in the beginning, I do think it needs to be listened at louder volumes to get its full effect or special sauce like the original EJ07s, which is why the Nightingale is a niche set in my opinion, since only certain scenarios mentioned like slower songs can achieve this without becoming sharp and fatiguing. Now, because the Nightingale is more niche, it's obviously not the most well-rounded, so if you want an all-rounder around $300, then the Hype 2 or Quintet would still be the better choice. Less fatiguing, more balanced, better sub-bass extension with an actual, normal vocal gain. However, for vocals alone, I would still take the EA1000s and the T2 since they're just more engaging, they're fuller, more emotional, and just sounds more natural to my ears. But on the other hand, the Performer 8 is also a solid option if you want a neutral sound, but without the extra treble energy and the sub bass slash vocal roll off on the Nightingale. Although none of these are gonna beat the Nightingale in terms of treble detail, staged air, layering, and imaging, sub bass and vocals, sure. So if you do want this type of performance but more well-rounded, then you'll have to jump up to the Zen's Top, the Supernova, and the Monarchs of the world. Compared to the 620s, the Nightingale scales better on those slower songs, and to me the imaging does feel a little bit sharper, and the detail and the air and the reverb are a little bit more. Vocal-wise, both are not the most extended and open and natural, normal vocal presentation. I would say they're around the same level in that regard. Bass goes to the 620 because it just has more sub-bass and similar separation. But yeah, the Nightingales are a very unique set, just like the EJ07s, and if you're tired of all the Harman diffuse fields out these days, then these are a pretty banging choice, but just make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. Anyhow, a great debut from SIVGA. I'm looking forward to more of their stuff in the future, but with that said, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see everyone in the next one.